My name is Jason Cassidy. I'm the CEO of Shinydocs Corporation. We've had some great success over the last few years with enterprise content management space, and we've been lured into the cognitive arena and doing some data analysis, and we have some products today that we're really excited to show you. It's primarily going to be a demo, and it's going to be at a few different levels. We'll start with the value proposition of what we're going to show, and then, of course, go into some how-to information. One thing that's really exciting about our offering is it's just how accessible everything that we're going to show you today. Some of these capabilities, such as artificial intelligence and OCR and other things, used to be confined to dedicated hardware or larger systems, and now it's more accessible. And what that means is everything that we're showing you here today can generally be set up in about an hour inside of your organization. You can start realizing the benefits of it immediately, and that's unlike a lot of competition out there and other systems that you've tried. Some quick background. We are the OpenText Technology Partner of the Year for the last 2 years. Nothing that we're going to show you today is OpenText specific or content server specific. There is some complementary features, of course, where all of the data analysis, classification, clustering, and these types of things, we have a one-click ingestion straight into OpenText Content Server in SharePoint, which is quite powerful and very interesting. So this upfront data analysis that you can do quite easily and then can be leveraged in your enterprise content management system. For those of you familiar with Shinydocs, obviously we've had a very good interface, the Shiny Drive technology, that is a front end for OpenText Content Server, SharePoint, and others, and it's an award-winning. It's been quite good and used worldwide right now, and we're quite proud of that. Some of what we're showing you today leverages a lot of that technology, the connectivity that we have to the systems and the understanding of how documents really work on users' desktops. And what we're really trying to achieve with what we're showing you today is something that's really important to a lot of our customers at this point, especially with GDPR looming and things like the Canadian Digital Privacy Act and other things that are coming in. It's really important to understand your dark data. For the last few years, we've heard a lot about big data and big data analytics, where you're using some of your transactional information to drive some decision making. However, when you compare how much data is in big data, it's really generally less than 15% of your organization's knowledge is actually being leveraged as part of your big data strategy. So when you take into account your users' desktops, your file shares, what's out there in email, you really want to be driving an understanding of all of that data, and you really want to be managing all that data, especially in light of things like GDPR, where you just can't let personal information, you can't let important business transactional information slip through the cracks just because it's a contract that happens to be out on somebody's desktop or lost on a file share. All that information has to be understood, and it has to be found in a timely manner. And right now there's huge stiff penalties associated with not having that information. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we look at some of the capabilities here. Automatic classification, clustering of documents, and what that means is the ability to go out and find documents that are like the particular ones, so you can bring them together and then give them a name and give them a classification. Of course, the e-discovery to go out and find individuals' names, find PII and other things. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mark Krotz. He is the Senior Director of Products here at Shinydocs Corporation. Some of you who are customers will know him through customer service interactions and other things, and certainly an expert on all this technology, and forward to a demonstration and talking about this value.
Thanks, Jason. So what you're looking at here is the result of a crawl. We have a sample data set that we downloaded from the Canadian Open Government Initiative, where they've got a lot of documents here. Of course, if you were crawling your own data this would look very, very different and would probably be much bigger. We've been using this technology at some customer sites already to crawl data sets on the order of 1 to 3 terabytes, and it's performing very, very well. Let me just give you a bit of an overview of what you're looking at. This is the result of a crawl. We call this our Shiny Drive visualizer. Across the top, you can see I've got a couple of numbers there, so it's showing me how many files have I crawled. How many of these are unique? So we're able to, through a hashing mechanism, we're able to determine which of those objects are actually identical. So I've covered that there. How much data are we looking at? Basically about 3 gigabytes. We can see information here below in a couple of pie charts and a donut chart of how much storage is taken up by each type of document. You can see here that a lot of these documents are Microsoft Office documents. We go over here, we can see the number of files by document type. So of all the ones that I've crawled, Looks like CSVs are the most common, followed by PDFs, followed by zip files, and so forth. And how many files have we extracted full text from? When we actually go and crawl this document, we have the ability to extract the full text. And even if it's a photograph or an image, we've got OCR technology working as well that'll go in and crawl that and convert that data to full text and put that into the index. Below, I've got some information here about dates, number of files by created date. So I can see here for these files, when were they created and when were they last accessed. Lastly, on this page, I've got top duplicated files. So using that hashing mechanism, I can tell, well, which of these files are exact copies of each other. And over on the right, it's showing a file listing, which is not terribly interesting yet. It's a listing of all the documents I have. So that's really not too useful till I actually do something with this page. So one of the first things we find when people run the crawlers, they go, well, that's really interesting. Why do I have so many duplicates of this document? So I can click on that. This resubsets or redraws this entire page with all of these filters based on what you were just looking at. So I'm now looking at 9 files. Obviously, only one of them is unique because they're duplicates of each other. These are all Excel files, and it looks like they've been copied for some reason, and they're basically exact copies of each other. So you could use that technology to go in and find and do something about your data the first time you run it. Normally, when we do an initial crawl at a customer site, they run it without any parameters on it because they want to see everything they have. And we did this for a customer, and they found pretty much right away that they had a 200 gigabyte backup file that was just sitting on their file share that they didn't even know was there, but just by looking at this report. So let's show you some other filters we can do. So I can look at Microsoft Office documents, or I can look at anything else here on this pie chart. I'm just going to click on that. Redraws all the data like I just showed, and now it's showing me all of the Microsoft Office documents. You can see here that an awful lot of these, 94% are CSV types. I've also got XLS, I've got Excel types, and so forth. And I can go down and, of course, just look at the dates, when they were created, when were they last modified, how many duplicates. These are those duplicates we were looking at before. And now I have this listing is now becoming meaningful to me. I might want to actually do something with this at this point. Maybe I'm running a report, or we've done filtering to the point that we found exactly the 20 or 30 or 100 documents we're interested. I can actually export that data. I can click on that, and that exports a file to my desktop, comma delimited CSV file, where I can see all of that data in a nice handy format. I can mark this up additionally if I want. I can get this data to somebody in my IT department to do something with that data. So that's very, very, very powerful. There's other ways to look at this data. So we have an e-discovery tool, which will search the same data set using the same index on the background. Let's say I'm looking for a particular type of information. It could be a person's name. It could be a social insurance number. It could be a credit card number that someone says, hey, are you aware that we've got this credit card number in the database, or an address or a prescription number, or anything that we're worried about, PII information. So I've been informed that we believe that there is a person by the name of Scott Andrews who's in our database, and I can right away tell it, oh yeah, I know exactly where that is. That's in this file here. I can grab the file. I can do something about that information right away. Something else we can do is we can look a little bit closer at that. So that search that I just did was using our e-discovery tool, which is a nice lightweight search tool. If you're a power user and want to go in and look under the covers at this data, I can do the same search because I want to see more information about that particular record. This is looking at our full text index here, and I can see data such as when was this created, what was the domain that was crawled from, what type of file is it, and I can look at the exact record. You can see here Scott Andrews is highlighted, so I can see exactly where that record is. So this is really, really interesting. This is like a huge record here. I'm not sure you can see how far I can scroll, but there is a lot of data in here, and you could see how fast it came back with that result. Some of the magic behind the technology that you're looking at is our Cognitive Toolkit. It's gone by a couple of different names, but the Cognitive Toolkit is the way to think of it because it's doing so much now. This is how you would kick off a crawl of a data set. A couple of different tabs and buttons here. I'm not going to show you all the levers and switches and things like that, but it might be interesting just to do a crawl of something that we've done here. One of the really, really cool things that we can do now is we can classify documents. So I've done, based on this data set that I've downloaded, I've pulled out some exemplar documents already. I've trained up our classifier on those documents, and the way we do that in terms of Setting up classifications is we organize that in a file structure with names for each of the classifications, and you can nest that many levels deep or keep it very, very shallow. It's up to you how you want to do that. And we can run a crawl. You can see it's going here. It's just loading up the initial data. We've got this little output window at the bottom here where I'll show it as it's going. While that is running, I'm just going to show you the data that I trained this on, which is kind of interesting. From all of the data that I had, I pulled out some of these just as exemplars. So Elections Canada, I pulled out documents that I thought might be good documents for using for training it to say that this is a document that's about Elections Canada. Similarly, I've got other things here, such as global affairs. These are documents that I believe to be about global affairs. And you're noticing these are not necessarily just Word documents or PDF documents. They can basically be pretty much anything that's got full text in them. So I did this ahead of time. I trained our classifier so it knows what these types of documents are. So when it sees them, it'll know what to do with them. So let's look at this summary here. So it tells me a little bit about what was crawled, what's in our database. If I go back to here, what I want to really look at is I want to look at the result. I'm just going to go and load up a visualization. So I have I have to refresh this since I just loaded some data. But what I'm going to show you here is these visualizations we have. I've also got a classification visualization, which is kind of here on the right. I did a slightly different view so you can see that it's different, but isn't this cool? We've gone through, we have 2 documents that are about the space agency. On the outside rim here, I've got a confidence rating. So it says a confidence of 1. So it says, I am positive this is a space agency document. Based on the full text in the document and based on the name pattern, text patterns within these documents, it's determined that that's what that is. Similarly here, this is a document about the CRTC. This is a document about Elections Canada. This is a document about global affairs. Now, this is interesting. It's gone, you know what? I'm not quite 100% sure that that document is really about global affairs. I think it is. I'm not sure. And as I was showing you before, I can click on any one of these, redraws the screen based on what my filter was that I just applied. I can go here and I can see that, you know what, this was in the global affairs. So it looks like that actually is a global affairs document. And you can, of course, react to and do something with that. Something else we can do. Again, we've got the full text of all of these documents in our database. Let's say you haven't classified your documents yet. Let's say you just have everything in this database, the full text is in there, and let's say you're looking for clustering. You're looking for documents that are like a document you have. So I have this abstract document that is in the data we've crawled. It's about Canada Davis Strait, Baffin Bay. I'm interested in finding documents that are similar to this. So what we can do with this technology is we've got the ability to do a more like this search. So what I've done here ahead of time, if I put the text in, this is currently a power user approach to doing this. The tool I showed previously, we are about to have this hooked up with this tool where you're going to be able to right click and do it more like this from here. It's just I don't have this to show you today, but that's going to be ready briefly. Well, let's just show how this works. So I'm going to say, okay, I've got that text. I want to find documents that are more like that one. And you saw how fast that came back. It came back very, very quickly. I've got all these hits here, and it's got different scores. And I can see each of these documents here. The OpenGov test data document. I've got this one. I've got this one. So it found on the order of about a dozen documents across the entire database of data that I've already crawled that are similar to the document that I crawled. And that's what we would call clustering. In terms of showing you the fundamental capabilities of the product, that covers most of the high-level points that I wanted to talk to today.
Thank you, Mark, for that demonstration. What I'd like to do is talk through a few example use cases as well. So use case number 1, we showed you, okay, here's 5 different types of documents out there, and not by Word, PowerPoint, or Excel, but is this one Elections Canada document? Is this one related to another department? So that's pretty cool as far as a classification, as far as the general area of interest of the document. Classifiers are generic in the sense that they don't really care what you're trying to classify. All they know is that they slot them into whatever category is appropriate for that particular document. So we can do it down to a discrete level of the exact document type. So if you have claims forms, contracts, you just say, okay, here's a folder that contains contract type A, here's a folder that contains contract type B, here's a folder that contains contract type C, and here's a folder that has claims form A, claims form B. You get the idea. And when the crawler runs through that folder, it trains up based upon the example data. And then as it crawls through the rest of your data, your gigabytes or terabytes of information, it will find every one of those claims forms. It'll find every one of those contracts and classify them appropriately. So humans don't have to do that. You did 6 documents there in just a couple of seconds or a few milliseconds, really. How long would it take for a human to go through 6 documents? Well, it'll probably take them a couple minutes per document. So we have an increase of thousands of times of performance, and you don't have to pay a salary to a piece of software that's doing this. So that's pretty exciting. Some other use cases to think about, though, is imagine that you want to classify your documents as being confidential or not. Previously, you'd have to have humans go through and flag this as being a confidential document, or maybe even confidential communication if we're crawling through email. But we can use the same classifier. Let's put in 100 examples of here's confidential emails and documents, and then here's 100 examples of regular public documents or emails. And the system will go through and look for different signatures in there. It will look for not just the word confidential, but that'll probably appear, but it'll look for other patterns as well within that data. So the idea of doing these binary type of classifications, is it confidential or not? The idea of going and finding the classification type, like what is this contract A, B, or C, or finding the information domain, like is it part of CRTC or Elections Canada or Canadian Space Agency or whatever. Those are the types of cool things that you can do with the information in the classifier. And of course, the clustering that we showed there, that's kind of finding the needle in a haystack. We went through this with a couple of customers where they're saying, okay, I've got hundreds of thousands of documents in my file share, and I just need to find these 10,000 documents of this type. And that's where the clustering comes in. So Mark showed you an example there where he was finding the abstract of a particular document type, and it went out and found all the other abstracts that are just like it. Same thing would apply for finding particular contracts or finding different forms. That way, you're not going through and classifying every document in your system, but you are finding the ones that are appropriate for that particular document type that you're looking for. So certainly, access to information, FOIA requests, GDPR readiness becomes quite simple once you have this hive mind, once you have this index that shows you all of your information. And certainly you don't have to use your imagination to see how that works. Most importantly, and you saw Mark just running the tool on his desktop there, this is something that's pretty accessible to your organization. You don't need big hardware, you don't need a lot of expensive software, you just need a good relationship with Shinydocs, and the information will get crawled and the visualizations start happening immediately. Certainly GDPR is something that's really interesting coming up soon. It applies to everybody in the world, anybody who does business in Europe, obviously, but the same type of legislation is coming in around the world. And being ready for this is quite important. So our step is, Shinydocs doesn't say that we are the GDPR compliance solution, because there's so many things your organization has to do to be compliant with this regulation. But what is most important is readiness, is how do you actually interrogate your data to answer the questions about where is a person's name. Like we saw Scott Andrews' name being used in one document. How would your organization find Scott Andrews' name inside of that? How would you become GDPR compliant? Of course, there's reporting and other things that have to go along with it. To me, that's the easy part. The hard part is, how do I actually find all that information? Well, that's where Shinydocs comes in with the solution. Is we give you the index, it crawls all the desktops, it crawls your email, it crawls your file shares, and it allows you that easy interrogation to find the information. And then it's up to you to go off and make sure that you're using the individual's information appropriately compliant with these types of regulations. The clustering one, I would want to reiterate the value of that, and that is finding that needle in a haystack. I want to go find 10,000 contracts inside of a shared drive or a system of shared drives, 20 or 30 different servers out there that all have these different things. I want to find these CAD drawings, or I want to find these contracts that are of a particular type or have particular indicators in them. And this thing can find it quite easily. And then, of course, the automatic classification. And this is where the AI really shines. When you look at a document, you don't look at just particular keywords or phrases, because often they change. My contract type A might have evolved over the last few years, and it doesn't always have the exact same phrases in there, but it has a likeness. It has a digital signature, if you will, that humans can really identify quickly. Okay, the title is kind of like this, and the content is kind of like this. It has this type of word frequency. Well, the AI engines pick up on that really quickly and really powerfully right now, so that you don't have to actually write code to make that happen. we're fully automated from end to end in this process, in the sense that you just need like a small sample shared drive that is moderately well organized, like Mark showed, that says, okay, here's where this type of document is, here's where that type of document is. That's our training material. And then you can go off and search your entire organization based upon that to do this classification and understanding. So I really like to thank you for joining today. This is the first time we've done a webinar on the Cognitive Toolkit, and we're really excited to continue to show you these things. There's one theme I want you to think about. When you start building up your index, when you start building up your artificial intelligence classifiers, these things tend to grow in value exponentially. And what I mean by that is, as your data becomes more aware of itself, as you classify the information, as you enrich the data, as you make it more searchable, it happens very quickly and it keeps building on itself. If you wonder, why is my internal search within my organization so much worse than Google? Because Google is constantly enriching that information. And your internal search provider, which might be just a SharePoint or an open text content server, unfortunately, it's just the static text. So you can use a system like ours to continually enrich and add different layers to your data, not just figure out what information domain, like is it CRTC or Elections Canada or whatever, but then you can layer on, is it confidential or not? You layer on, is it this type of contract or that type of contract? And you keep layering on this information, it becomes more and more valuable. But when you think about it, the real key variable there is time. If you don't start today and your competitor starts today, then they're going to have a massive head start on you with respect to their understanding and use of their data. And you don't want to let them have that head start. So that's why I encourage you to start today. What we're trying to sell to you right now is, obviously, we're a software company and we want you to buy some software, but really we want you to buy the value associated with the outcome here. So we want you to try a proof of concept, pick out a few gigabytes, maybe up to a terabyte of information that you'd like to understand and rationalize, and we'll come in and help you understand that data faster than anybody else, and you'll see the real value, and then it'll encourage you to then go off and capture the rest of your information. So that's it. I really appreciate your time. Certainly what we're looking to do is run proof of concepts. If you have questions, I encourage you to get in contact with Mark. He is the expert on all things with respect to our customer engagements and our product. That's mark@shinydocs.com. Again, my name is Jason Cassidy, and I really want to thank you again for your time today.